Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us here tonight for the first installment of Wall in Response. This is a special four-event series co-presented by Booksmith and the Clarion Alley Mural Project. My name is Evan Karp. I'm the events manager for Booksmith. We're an independent bookstore and mainstay of San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury district since 1976. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the store and what we have going on. Then I'll turn it over to camp's director or co-director Christopher Staton, who will be our MC for the evening. Booksmith centers stories of the marginalized and underrepresented to create what we hope is an equitable place for everyone. Our store is open for limited browsing from 11 to 2 every day currently. We're also doing curbside pickup from 11 to 6 daily. You can shop online anytime at booksmith.com and we'll deliver right to your door. We're currently offering free shipping throughout San Francisco and the East Bay. I should point out also that our amazing staff has put together a holiday guide for gifting and shopping purposes, which you can browse at the website. Since this is such a strange year and things are taking a bit longer than usual, we highly recommend that you do your holiday shopping a bit early this year. We are happy to bring you a lot of our events virtually while we shelter in place to help stop the spread of the coronavirus. We've scaled down our events a bit from between now and the end of the year, but we do have a few coming up. Next week, we're actually taking the week off, not because we're traveling to see family, which we're definitely not doing, and according to science, you probably should not be doing either. But the following week, we host a group of writers from the Headland Center for the Arts. We did a series with them at the beginning of lockdown, and it was really phenomenal. We also have a conversation between Annalee Newitz and Maria Devanand Headley. We have a couple more events also before the end of the year. You can find out more about those and some other upcoming events at booksmith.com. Before I introduce Christopher, just a few house items before we get started. At the top right corner of your screen, you'll probably have noticed that there's a chat window. I encourage you to show the artist some love, talk amongst yourselves, let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have questions at any point, you can ask in the chat. We will have a Q&A at the end of the program. We have a one-strike policy in the chat, no trolling, nothing hateful. We'll be forced to remove you, and that won't be fun for anyone, so please don't do that. Also, if you are having any trouble with the tech, I will be right there to help in just a moment. But first, it's my honor to introduce Christopher Staton, co-director of Clarion Alley Mural Project. Christopher is an artist, arts administrator, and community activist based in San Francisco. Prior to camp, Staton was executive director of San Francisco's Roxy Theater during its transition to a nonprofit community-based independent film venue. Staton became involved with camp in 2012 when the Roxy Theater hosted projects and events celebrating camp's 20th anniversary. Since then, Staton has collaborated or individually painted 7 murals on Clarion Alley and 3 murals in Jakarta, Indonesia, as part of the Jining Street Art Project and Bangkit Arise, an international exchange project which Staton also helped to organize. In 2013, Staton was the recipient of the San Francisco Film Critics Circle's Marlon Riggs Award for Courage and Vision in the Bay Area film community and received the San Francisco's Board of Supervisors Certificate of Honor. An alumnus of the Said Business School's postgraduate organizational leadership program at Oxford University, Staton is currently a member of the Leaderless San Francisco Poster Syndicate. That's it from me. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I know we're all in for a treat. Christopher, thanks so much for emceeing. I'm happy to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Evan. And thank you to our hosts, the Booksmith and the Bindery, for making this virtual event possible. Good evening. Welcome to the first of 4 public events as part of Clarion Alley Mural Project's Wall in Response, where poets are invited to write in response to the murals on Clarion Alley. Thank you for taking the time on this Friday night to join us. I hope everyone is doing well and staying healthy. This past year has filled the emotional spectrum, all while stuck in isolation. But the strength of the community still shines through. And though only virtually, I am grateful to be able to gather and share this evening with you here tonight. The grassroots arts community here in San Francisco produces fierce social justice messaging. In a rapidly changing city, against the odds, there are spaces that keep and embrace the uniqueness of a neighborhood through the love and support of its residents, giving a sense of place that transcends time and space. It is within that place where reminders of struggles and triumphs are found. I like to think of Clarion Alley as such a space. It has been that way for years. Clarion Alley is like a vortex of artistic and social justice practices. Back in the early 20th century, Thomas Mooney was on the alley organizing railway workers to unionize. In the early 1970s, the Cockettes, San Francisco's famous avant-garde queer psychedelic troupe, practiced on the alley. So, when 28 years ago, 6 Mission neighborhood residents came together to paint murals on the alley, not surprisingly, there were messages about social justice. And from the beginning, poetry was a part of the project. Within the first year, a poem was painted on a wall as a mural itself. Throughout the years, Camp, along with other community partners, hosted poetry readings on the alley and in other Mission locations, such as the Women's Building. The visual space of the work on the alley is open to all. No barriers, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The curation of the alley tries to honor that space. The murals are gifts from the community to the community, works that reflect the experiences of the community, because they directly address the issues that we all face. And through this, we know that there is solidarity, that we are not alone. As Emory Douglas, Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party, said, "To be inspired by is to be in spirit with." Tonight is a first for Clarion Alley Mural Project, not just because this is a virtual event. This event represents an artistic first for Camp. In Camp's prior poetry events, the messages of the poems align with the messages on the walls. However, it wasn't until Megan Wilson and Maw Shein Win came together and created Wall in Response that the poems were created in direct response to the murals. At the conclusion of Wall in Response, the San Francisco Poster Syndicate will be printing a limited series of portfolios with the poems and images. Megan Wilson is a visual artist, writer, and activist based here in San Francisco. Wilson has been a core organizer of Clarion Alley Mural Project since 2001. Maw Shein Win is a poet, editor, and educator who lives and teaches here in the Bay Area. Win is the first poet laureate of El Cerrito, California, and her recent poetry collection, Storage Unit for the Spirit House, was published by Omnidon in October of this year. Megan and Maw's past collaborations have been conversations between visual and written narratives. Over the years, the narratives on the walls have changed. Sadly, over my years of working with Camp, I've seen more and more memorials be painted on the alley. I used to give tours of Clarion Alley to students of all ages. As many of you remember, the utility wires running through the alley have shoes hanging from them. And, inevitably, a student would ask why there were so many shoes hanging from the wires. I would respond that there are a lot of urban legends about what shoes hanging from wires symbolize. One legend says that shoes hung over power lines are memorials to those who have passed away. That means floating above us are the feet of the ghosts who once walked the streets, now witness to the world that we still inhabit. The number of shoes hanging on the wires have grown to the point where the wire sags, as it can no longer support the weight of the overwhelming loss. Tonight's Wall in Response event will be a powerful and at times heart-wrenching evening of poems honoring the life and calling attention to the slaying of Luís Demetrio Góngora Pat, a 46-year-old man, a father, a husband, a son, a brother, a cousin, a member of the community. Luís was struggling to live in the city. He was experiencing homelessness. Living in this vulnerable situation, the state did not treat Luís with dignity. Instead, he was murdered by the police in the spring of 2016, executed without trial by those whom we have empowered to protect us. Through the tireless work of Luís Pat's cousin, Luís Poot, and human rights defender Adriana Camarena, Luís Pat's story has not been forgotten. Amidst the pain and grief of a senseless death, Adriana and Luís Poot co-founded Justice for Luís. JusticeForLuís.org is a grassroots coalition seeking justice for Luís and to repair the harm caused by the SFPD officers to his family, his encampment community, and to our community at large. I'm grateful for all the hard work Adriana and Luis Put have done for the community. They are true heroes. Working with Justice for Luis, Camp was able to connect artists Elaine Chu and Marina Perez-Wong, the co-founders of the mural collaborative Twin Walls Mural Company, to paint a memorial mural for Luis Pat. With the talent Elaine and Marina have, they brought a magic to the project that could never have been planned. Right after the mural was finished, Luis's family came to San Francisco for the civil trial of the guilty officers. Under these sad circumstances, we had the honor of meeting Luis's family. And though only a few pictures exist of Luis Pat, the portrait Elaine and Marina created was identical to Luis's son. Tonight's video, filmed by Mahima Kotian, will run just shy of 45 minutes. It will open with Megan Wilson introducing Wall and Response. Then Maw Shein Win will introduce the poets. This will be followed by Luis Put speaking about his cousin and the community, translated by Adriana. Filmed on the alley in front of the memorial mural, the poems will be read by the poets: Heather Bourbeau, Aileen Cassinetto, Stroffolino, and Tongo Eisen-Martin. Adriana will follow the readings with the Spanish translations of the poems. Lastly, Marina and Elaine will speak about the mural. Immediately following the film, we're very honored to be joined by the curators, the muralists, the poets, and along with Adriana for a Q&A. Please type your questions into the chat at any time during the film or the Q&A, and we will try to get to all of them. Recently, Mumia Abu Jamal said, "People need space to celebrate, especially after this year of death, destruction, and the coronavirus. One disease has been defeated, and now others have to be defeated." Though we are physically in separate spaces, let us celebrate together tonight, listening to the words of the poets as they take us on a journey together through Clarion Alley, and let Luis's story remind us all of the work that we have ahead to make a safer community for all.
Tu pena se lleva el viento, jilguera, no llores más. Volando se fue tu cría y nunca más.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Wilson, artist and organizer with Clarion Alley Mural Project. Welcome to Wall and Response, a project featuring 16 poets responding to the social, political, and racial justice narratives of 4 murals on Clarion Alley, co-curated by myself and poet Maw Shein Win. Participants include poets Heather Bourbeau, Aileen Cassinetto, Tongo Eisen-Martin, and Stroffolino, responding to the mural Justice for Luís D. Góngora Pat by Marina Perez-Wong and Elaine Chu, working with the Góngora Pat family and justiceforluis.org. Poets Carla Brundage, Jennifer Hasegawa, Tarita Mikkel, and Kim Shook, responding to the work What We Want by Emery Douglas, remixed by David Petrelli, Kuba, and Mace. Poets Celeste Chan, M.K. Chavez, Paul Corman Roberts, and Tim Zonnelly, responding to the mural Affordable Housing, Vivienda Asequible by the SF Print Collective, working with the Western Regional Advocacy Project, WRAP, and poets Youssef Alaoui, Jason Bayani, Jenny Lim, and Michael War, responding to the Arab Liberation mural by Art Forces, the Arab Resource Organizing Center, AROC, and Arab Youth Organizing, AYO. Wall and Response is made possible with the generous support of the San Francisco Arts Commission and the Zellerbach Family Foundation. Thank you for believing in our work. In selecting the murals for Wall and Response, I reflected on Clarion Alley Mural Project's role in the community over the past decade in response to the hypergentrification that has plagued the San Francisco Bay Area. The cultural shift has meant an epidemic of evictions, a significant decrease in our Black and Latinx communities, devastating income inequality, an overwhelming number of people who are unhoused, and a disturbing increase in police violence and fatal shootings of citizens by police. In response to these impacts of hypergentrification in the Bay Area and throughout the world, CAMP made the decision to prioritize projects that give voice to local and global narratives in support of social, economic, political, racial, and environmental justice. The 4 murals selected for Wall in Response exemplify successful collaborations between artists and larger organizing forces that represent this collective effort. Based on the walls selected, my co-curator, Maw Shein Win, invited Bay Area poets whose practices include social and political engagement to respond to the power of resistance reflected in these works. Thank you for joining us. Stay safe. Justice for Luís D. Góngora Pat, painted in 2018 by Marina, Perez-Wong and Elaine Chu, working with the Góngora Pat family and justiceforluis.org, is a memorial to Luís Demetrio Góngora Pat, a 45-year-old man, a father, husband, son, brother, and friend to many, from the Mayan village of Teabo in the Mexican province of Yucatán. Góngora Pat was killed by 2 San Francisco police officers in an act of police brutality on April 7, 2016, at the encampment he was living on Shotwell Street, following an eviction. Perez-Wong and Chu presented the mural to Luis's family and their supporters in an emotional ceremony on the 2-year anniversary of his death. The Justice for Luís campaign has continued its work towards justice and restoration in the name of Luis Góngora Pat through their advocacy and organizing efforts.
My name is Adriana Camarena. I am a local resident here of the Mission District. And since April 2016, soon after Luis was killed by 2 SFPD officers, I have been accompanying the family of Luis Góngora Pat. And I am honored by their trust and their company as well, and all the things that we have taught each other. Luis Góngora Pat was 45 years old at the time of his death. He was a son, a brother, a father, a cousin, a community member. And he was living homeless at the time of his killing. What we know about the case is that SF Hot Team was called to the encampment because there was a complaint of a child crying, a baby crying in the encampment. And so the SF Hot Team arrived to talk to a woman who was pregnant. She was fine, but in doing so, they saw that Luis had a knife. He wasn't threatening anybody. He just had a knife. And so they called 911 with no particular threat involved. When 2 officers arrived, Sergeant Nate Steger and Mike Malone, they exited their police car with weapons, drawing weapons immediately. Michael Malone drew a beanbag rifle and started shooting, calling out at Luis to commands in English that he could not understand, startling him. Luis, by all witness accounts, there are many witnesses, was simply sitting on the ground. We know from the autopsy that those first 5 beanbag rounds that Michael Malone shot all hit him on the back as he lay and turned to their shots to protect himself. Propelled by the shots, says one witness, he got up to his feet, which is when the officers started still yelling him, "Get on the ground, get on the ground." There are confusing accounts whether the knife fell from him, from his waistband where he often kept it, or from his hand. Either way, he was not a threat. Simultaneously to the beanbag rounds being shot, Nate Steger started shooting bullets. And at some point, Michael Malone also raises his firearm, beanbag rifle in one hand, firearm in the other. And you can see in a partial video that they aim downward as Luis is down on the ground, and Michael Malone gives the executioner's shot to the head, the only fatal wound to Luis's body. He died hours later at San Francisco General Hospital. That is what happened to Luis Góngora Pat. You'll often see him referred to in the media as homeless man, killed by SFPD, which erases everything that he was. I love this effort of putting the mural together to tell a visual story for those of us who can't read or write, but also to have permanence in our storytelling. I love the poetry, the spoken word, which is how Luis learned and got through, came here and got along with his encampment members who I had an opportunity to talk to, who Spanglished and their way through communications. So I really appreciate this. Luis always tells me, I always consult him, hey Luis, community members want to do this thing. And he always answers, if it's positive, sure, why not? And for me, my goal in this project is to transform trauma, the family trauma and the community trauma. So when we take this really painful story and transform it and work it again and again, it heals the family, it heals me, it heals all of us, and it connects us all, and it creates our own record, our historical record. So thank you very much.
Buenos días a todos. Mi nombre es Luis Armando Pat, primo de Luis Góngora Pat. Asesinado el 7 de abril del 2016. Él es mi primo y estoy aquí representando a la familia. Estoy aquí para agradecer y dejarles saber a todo este grupo de gente o de la comunidad que nos han ayudado a vivir esta experiencia muy difícil, muy traumático. Nosotros somos indígenas mayas que nuestra pobreza nos empujó a llegar a este país, pensando que las cosas van a mejorar en nuestras vidas, en nuestras familias. Pero desgraciadamente a muchos de nosotros nos sucede algo en el camino de nuestra vida. El ejemplo de ello es mi primo, que este mural representa en nuestra vida y en la sociedad, no solo acá en este país, pero también en nuestro país, en nuestra familia, en toda la comunidad acá en San Francisco. Pero gracias a toda esta gente, a ustedes, a todos los organizadores o a toda la comunidad que nos ayudan a vivir con este trauma. Luis Góngora Pat era fue un gran hijo, padre, amigo, primo, hermano, paisano, que hoy recordamos, que gracias a ustedes seguimos recordando. Él no hablaba bien el español, entendía el español, pero no lo practicaba mucho. Una anécdota que nos pasó aquí en este área, cuando él llegó, que yo me acuerdo. Acá en la taquería Pancho Villa, lo llevé a comer. Era como las 11 de la mañana y llegamos a la taquería Pancho Villa y le pregunté, "Basta, Kahanik Pring, ¿qué quieres comer?" Y él me dijo, un burrito, un burrito. Y le digo, dímelo en español. Y me lo dijo. Y luego le pregunté, ¿Banca Nabuqué? ¿qué vas a tomar? Y él no sabía qué contestar. Y digo, no sé qué hay. Me dijo, Bachani. Y yo le dije, ahí está la lista. Puedes mirar. Pero no sabía leer. Y yo en ese momento no lo pensé. Y yo le dije, lee, tú sí puedes leer, lee. Y me dijo que no. Y de último me dijo, Caste no pechina, que nuestro pueblo significa que quería un jugo de naranja. Y yo le dije, que China no hay. Y empezó a reírse, empezó a ponerse un poco triste, porque él estaba mirando la naranja en el mostrador y no entendía por qué no hay. Y yo le dije que no ordenara jugo de China, que ordenara jugo de naranja dulce. Y él se puso muy triste. Y es cuando me acordé que él no hablaba bien español, no sabía leer, no sabía escribir. Y fue como fuimos conviviendo en este país. La tristeza de nuestra realidad que desconocemos cuando llegamos en este país, en esta ciudad. No sabemos cómo ordenar una comida, no sabemos cómo utilizar el transporte, no sabemos cómo pagar la renta, no sabemos cómo ir al hospital, no sabemos muchísimas cosas aquí. Y es lo difícil cuando llegamos. A mí me pasó lo mismo. Es bien difícil, pero aquí estamos. Estamos luchando por un cambio en nuestras vidas, aquí y en nuestro país. Desgraciadamente, este país no es como lo dicen. Es muy difícil vivir aquí, especialmente para los inmigrantes. Yo creo que todos los inmigrantes. Y es muy poca la gente que nos pueden ayudar en nuestra vida diaria. Es muy difícil encontrar ayuda para gente que esté llegando en este país, especialmente la gente indígena, especialmente la gente que no sabe leer y escribir, que solo está buscando una manera de vivir, una oportunidad para buscar un trabajo y tener un poco de dinero para poder sobrevivir aquí y en su país. Así que hoy estamos aquí para recordar todo esto y que no se olviden todas las familias que llegamos aquí, que hay que ayudar, hay que prestar un poco de ayuda a todos los amigos, conocidos, paisanos, para poder sobresalir en nuestras vidas, en especial cuando pasan muchos problemas en nuestras vidas, como en el caso de mi primo, que desgraciadamente hasta hoy seguimos viviendo el trauma, el dolor, porque no es fácil. A ninguna familia se le desea o le deseo como lo que le pasó a mi primo, que dejó 3 hijos huérfanos, una viuda, sus papás, sus mamás, la mamá. Es muy difícil. Todavía siguen llorando la pérdida de su hijo, de su papá, de su hermano. Así que agradezco a todos ustedes por participar para seguir recordando la historia de la vida de mi primo, Luís Demetrio Góngora Pat. Agradezco a todos ustedes, a toda la comunidad, a una amiga que no tengo palabras para decirlo, se llama Adriana Camarena. Adriana, muchas gracias por todo esto. 4 años y medio viviendo con ella. Ella fue la primera persona que encontré que pudo ayudarme a sacar o a buscar ayuda, apoyo, ayuda legal, ayuda para todo lo que hemos vivido en estos 4 años y medio. Y todavía sigue. Ella ya asistió a Yucatán con la familia, creo que 2 veces y fallamos esta vez. Vamos para la tercera o la 4ª vez, ya ni me acuerdo. Pero agradezco mucho todo a esta gran mujer que no tengo palabras para agradecerlo. A Cris, a todos. Muchísimas gracias. Gracias a todos. Que tengan buenas tardes.
4 Bay Area poets, Heather Bourbeau, Aileen Cassinetto, Tongo Eisen-Martin, and Stroffolino read poems in response to the mural, Justice for Luís D. Góngora Pat by Marina Perez-Wong and Elaine Chu. Their practice and work speak to social and political community, and their poems honor not only the intent, but also his life. Poet Laureate of San Mateo County, Aileen Cassinetto curates the social justice theme reading series, Power to the Poets, and is the author of the poetry collections Traje de Boda and the Pink House Purple Yam Preserves and other poems, as well as 3 chapbooks through Mariah Books' acclaimed Locofo series. In her poem, From the Vow Made, in honor of Luis Góngora Pat, she opens with the line, "Let this be an offering to the dead and sacred."
From the vow made in honor of Luís Demetrio Góngora Pat. Let this be an offering to the dead and sacred. Pozole, pavo, poema, sapo. What was sown on fallow ground was corn, white as bone. Let the earth and the little water it holds shelter every tassel and blister. Let it yield a crop. Somewhere north, your fate lies on a bedstone, head down, crouching so close to the ground. Sapo, when you cross the border, you will not be coming back. You will be called migrant and vagrant. The last words you will hear are foreign and without mercy. But from a vow made, there will be offerings like this. Growing in rows, swearing justice in your name.
Poet Heather Bourbeau has worked with various UN agencies, including the UN Peacekeeping Mission in Liberia and UNICEF Somalia. She is the winner of La Piccioletta Barca's inaugural competition and the Chapman University Flash Fiction winner. El Honor de Luis is part of her latest collection, Monarch, a poetic memoir of overlooked histories from her American West. In her poem, El Honor de Luis, she writes, "I was poor, but I still provided. I was unhoused, but I still found friends. I struggled, but I still found joy."
El Honor de Luis. I was an immigrant, classic American tale, farm worker wanting better for my children. 3,000 miles, 14 years, missed birthdays and baptisms, remittances and remembrance. So few spoke my language here. For this, should I be killed? I was Maya, cornfields and altars, Quetzalcoatl and Kukulkan, Chaya and Loros, Harana and Guayaberas, Yucca and honey, small home built with money sent over 7 years. For this, I was a Mexican, sold horse and summer harvest to join my brother north, Milagro and Virgin, found work and community, house of mold and bedbugs, rodents and roaches, 5 men, 2 beds, beer and soccer. For this, I was poor, but I still provided. I was unhoused, but I still found friends. I struggled, but I still found joy. For this, April 7th, 2016, in need of food and shelter, counselor and advocate, I became a number. 30 seconds, 4 beanbag shots, 7 bullets as I lay on the ground. Even if you never knew my name, in Kushtal, my life had value. Flowers and candles, photos and saints. Ask my wife, who seeks answers and comfort. Ask my mother, who had to bury her child. Ask the trees that still long for the air I once breathed. Allensworth. When you reimagine landscapes and liberties, you must remember who controls the drip and drought controls the dream. Allen Allensworth, born a slave, became seaman, minister, Kentucky delegate to Republican national conventions. 1908, Owens Valley farmers were cast aside for aqueduct to Slake, Los Angeles. 1908, Allensworth left the City of Angels to build a new Eden. Central Valley Rail Depot, fertile soil, access to water, founded, financed, and governed by blacks, free of racism, able to blossom and thrive. 4 years later, 100 residents welcomed Alwertha Hall, first baby born. 2 general stores, post office, school, library, bakery, drugstore, hotel. Poultry and sugar beet farms, plaster and carpentry shops, Girls' Glee Club, Children's Savings Association, Debating Society. But railroad built a spur to avoid town, refused to hire blacks as depot's manager or ticket agent. Pacific Farming never delivered enough water. And as James Meredith was shot trying to cross Mississippi Delta, arsenic was found in Allensworth water. Town was scheduled for demolition. In the Golden State, all roads begin and end with water. At town's dedication, Allensworth the man had said, "We must do as they did, settle upon the bare desert, cause it to bloom like a rose." But Adam and Eve had Pishon, Gihon, Chiktagdel, and Pirat pouring forth from a single source. In 1908, Tulare Basin fed artesian wells, alfalfa, corn, and livestock. Men harvested fish with buckets. 20 years later, Tulare Lake had been drained dry. At the Midnight Mine, twin brothers uncovered the glow where the Spokane and Columbia rivers meet, on discarded land too rough to plow. Cold War, hot rocks, patriotism, pride. Through town to mill, crush and beat, patty cake, yellow cake, paycheck man. Miners brought home playthings, hard rubber balls, pretty green rocks, dust between trucks, dust in the air, dusty work clothes washed off-site. Near the pit, women tanned deer and elk hides. Sweat lodges had tainted willow and water. Young man swam in the river, ate roots and berries and wild game, died of a rot that started in his bladder, spread through his limbs. Volunteer gravedigger worked the mind, blesses too many plots with sage and sweetgrass, thought he was providing for a family he contaminated every day. Where the deer find refuge. I turn my back as winter sun sets, and a fat sparrow hops between leaves, the full and the fallen. I fix a cup of tea, milky and sweet, and worry a knot behind my shoulder blade, my infallible corporeal rosary. There used to be a chapel in a building that no longer exists. I mend my Bosnian slippers and watch a boat go down the Oolonga River, 1914, ripples and butterflies, ripples and butterflies. There will be more time yet to cry, to rage, to hold each other. I raise my pen to meet thick paper, and a crow struggles against storm. The necessary can feel futile. There is a crack in the wood where the ants come in. I welcome the jazz of rain on roof and wonder where the deer find refuge. Be grateful, be alert. Hard rains. Hard rains. Thank you.
Poet, educator, and musician Chris Stroffolino lives in Oakland and teaches English at Laney College. He is the author of Drinking from What I Once Wore and Slumming It in White Culture. In his poem, Cultivating Resistance, he writes, Lady of Guadalupe, the bringer of maize, mother of corn, healing goddess sustaining divine feminine energy, who emblazoned the Zapatistas' banners, bringing attention to the plight of farm workers, migrants, undocumented, scowling at the police headquarters across the street, but with hands too busy praying to hold a gun.
Cultivating resistance. The devil's in the details, in the ex-votos. But there she hovers, large, in the middle, between the living and the dead, between the Mayan rural on the left and the American city on the right. The Lady of Guadalupe, the bringer of maize, mother of corn, healing goddess, sustaining divine feminine energy, who emblazoned the Zapatistas' banners, bringing attention to the plight of farm workers, migrants, undocumented, scowling at the police headquarters across the street, but with hands too busy praying to hold a gun, calling on us to recognize our spiritual connectedness, to move beyond our fears of separateness, to fight the borders between countries, to help us find in the bloody red rectangle the green of cultivating resistance and justicia contra asesinos, to celebrate the spirit of a man who lived sacrifice, who became homeless building his family's home, and even when homeless, sent money from cans he collected, who made something out of nothing that wasn't nothing until something came around. Luis Góngora Pat, working class hero. Bettina Love's right when she says social change cannot happen without art for joy and resistance. But how to find joy right now in a country where God rhymes with gun, flows like capitalism's cancerous growth, like the IMF and NAFTA making a killing, forcing Mayans like Luis and Jose from their families in the communal ejido, as if a maquiladora or selling a horse in a summer's harvest to pay for a coyote to work 14-hour days, washing dishes in a sanctuary city and living with 5 people in a single room with mold-encrusted walls, crumbling ceilings, busted plumbing, communal bathrooms filled with rats and cockroaches for 10 years is somehow the American dream of upward mobility, and then be evicted for not speaking English. Would we be strong enough to take it? Will the developers ever think of listening to better guardians of the land than we could ever be, as I sat in Mel's Diner in 2004, not even bothering to thank Luis for helping keep prices a little lower than if whites had done it? America, we tried to kill Luis's soul long before the killer cop who still got a job. In the plutocratic technocracy of Frisco's disembodied son, settler colonialism and environmental destruction are one. And what's the difference between a missionary with a gun and a homeless outreach worker calling 911?
Poet, movement worker, and educator, Tongo Eisen-Martin, author of Someone's Dead Already and Heaven is All Goodbyes, which received the California Book Award and an American Book Award. His latest curriculum on extrajudicial killing of Black people, We Charge Genocide Again, has been used as an educational tool throughout the country. In Pennies for the Opera, he writes, "We are houseless now, and dancing our waistlines into a courtroom floor."
Our perfect confidence in the sun. In commemoration, every tambourine 1,000 miles in every direction, playing in a California rent party, rattlers dancing and bleeding over God's non-whitened skin, waiting for the cornfield to shrug, we are forgetful, but your ancestors nevertheless, slowing down the poem to the speed of sweet light, the speed of bedless deaths, the bones of fast friends near a pile of first fruits, a pile of imperialist failings. Oppressor and oppressed give their guns the same nickname. Underground working class sort of goes back to school, sort of studies revolution. The summer belongs to itself now, as does a sharecropper's God, as does the death mask. Real advice from Malcolm, real rose chords over my Memphis skeleton. A tenor part before dying, playing to our waning blood pressure, our penny-plated gun, the last of the space-time tuck. You know, white people would have sold us standing naked on anything. Sold us off a huge garden crystal or peacock feather. Sold us off a stack of doo-wop records if they could, would have sold us off the perfection of the cosmos. Forestry of drug paraphernalia, suburb spikes in the grass. Syringe jungle like a sick bed. Execution needle that became a society's bottleneck. Preamble noose talk or nuclear scientists thank for their work. Activists who don't scream black power, rather black component. A painful season gone sentient and well-dressed, taken as a whole, taken in puppet skin. A sentient Sunday that married 15 sticks of dynamite. We are houseless now and dancing our waistlines into a courtroom floor. Atlantic Ocean throwing my voice into the city weeds in the other Confederacy. I would double down on this poem, on this gang friendship. Signs of apocalypse in all directions. I'd run this poem into the ground. On my 5th skip meal today, Lord, we become even better friends. Dollar store notebooks in a mass context. Pen cap full of bullets. California color line is played out with necro protest types who sleep on the other earth while we are waiting to shoot on a muralist's behalf. This waiting, like an old man's truancy of sorts, or a tear stain on a panther pamphlet, houseless bookseller speaking about little Bobby the Conqueror, a crisis of open-air corrections, chemical extradition, and war songs wearing off. Around the corner from South Texas, you pretended that prison is a river. You married your American cop, black skin, white mantras, like normal speed bullets changing a normal life, like walking back to the United States in defeat.
This is Aileen Cassinetto's poem from the vow made. Del juramento hecho en honor a Luis Góngora Pat. Que esto sea una ofrenda a los muertos y sagrados. pozole, pavo, poema, sapo. Lo que se sembró en barbecho era maíz, blanco como el hueso. Deja que la tierra y la poca agua que retiene albergue cada borla y ampolla. Deja que rinda una cosecha. En algún lugar del norte, tu destino yace sobre una piedra de asiento, cabeza abajo, agachado, tan cerca al suelo, sapo. Cuando cruces la frontera no vendrás de vuelta. Serás llamado migrante y vagabundo. Las últimas palabras que oirás serán extranjeras y sin piedad. Pero de un juramento hecho habrá ofrendas como esta, creciendo en filas, jurando justicia en tu nombre. This is by Heather Bourbeau, en honor de Luis. Yo era un inmigrante, cuento americano clásico, campesino con ganas de algo mejor para sus hijos. 3,000 millas, 14 años, extrañando cumpleaños y bautizos, remesas y recuerdos. Muy pocos hablan mi idioma aquí. Por esto debieron matarme. Yo era maya, milpas y altares, Quetzalcóatl y Cuculcán, chaya y loros, jarana y guayaberas, yuca y miel. Pequeña casa construida con dinero enviado durante 7 años. Por esto. Yo era mexicano, vendí caballo y cosecha de verano para alcanzar a mi hermano, norte, milagro y virgen. Encontré trabajo y comunidad, casa de moho y chinches, roedores y cucarachas. 5 hombres, 2 camas, cerveza y fútbol. Por esto. Yo era pobre, pero seguí dando sustento. No tenía casa, pero aún así encontré amigos. Sufrí, pero aún así encontré alegría. Por esto. 7 de abril de 2016, con necesidad de comida y refugio, consejero y defensor, me convertí en un número. 30 segundos, 4 tiros de bolsas de goma, 7 balas, mientras yacía en el suelo. Incluso si nunca supiste mi nombre, en Kushtal, mi vida tenía valor. Flores y velas, fotos y santos. Pregúntale a mi esposa que busca respuestas y consuelo. Pregúntale a mi madre quien tuvo que enterrar a su hijo. Pregúntale a los árboles que aún anhelan el aire que alguna vez respiré. Luis, by Stroffolino. Luis Góngora Pat, héroe de la clase trabajadora. Bettina Love tiene razón cuando dice: cambio social no puede suceder sin el arte para la alegría y la resistencia. Pero ¿cómo encontrar alegría ahora mismo en un país donde Dios rima con arma, fluye como el crecimiento canceroso del capitalismo, como el FMI y el Telecan, obligando a mayas como Luis y José a ir lejos de sus familias y del ejido comunal, como si una maquiladora o vender un caballo y una cosecha de verano para pagar un coyote para trabajar 14 horas al día lavando platos en una ciudad santuario para los blancos, que ni siquiera piensan en escuchar la sabiduría de mejores guardianes de la tierra, de lo que jamás podríamos serlo, es de alguna manera movilidad ascendente. Centavos para la ópera, de Tongo, Eisen-Martin. Nuestra perfecta confianza en el sol, en conmemorar cada pandereta 1000 millas en todas direcciones, jugando en una fiesta californiana para juntar fondos para pagar el alquiler, cascabeles bailando y sangrando sobre la piel no blanqueada de Dios, esperando que el maizal se encoja de hombros. Somos olvidadizos, pero aún así, tus ancestros, lentificando el poema a la dulce velocidad de la luz, la velocidad de muertos sin camas, los huesos de grandes amigos cerca de una pila de primeras frutas, una pila de fracasos imperialistas, opresor y oprimido dando a sus armas el mismo apodo, clase trabajadora subterránea, como que regresa a la escuela, como que estudia revolución. El verano ahora pertenece a sí mismo, así como el dios del aparcero, así como la máscara de muerte. Verdadero consejo de Malcolm. Verdaderas cuerdas de rosa sobre mi esqueleto de Memphis, tocando la parte de un tenor antes de morir, tocando para nuestra presión sanguínea menguante. Nuestra pistola chapada en centavos, el último tiempo-espacio, ajustada. Los blancos nos hubieran vendido, parados desnudos sobre cualquier cosa, vendidos sobre un jardín de cristal enorme o una pluma de pavo real. Nos hubiesen vendido sobre una pila de discos doo-wop, si hubiesen podido, nos hubieran vendido, parados sobre la perfección del cosmos. Bosques de bienes parafernales de droga, picos suburbanos en el pasto, jungla de jeringas como la cama de enfermos de la cama de enfermos. Jeringa de ejecución que se convierte en cuello de botella de la sociedad. Preámbulo al discurso de la soga o al científico nuclear agradecido por su trabajo. Activistas que no gritan poder negro, más bien componente negro. Una temporada dolorosa, temporada vuelta sensible y bien vestida, tomada en su totalidad, tomada en su piel de títere. Un domingo sensible casado con 15 varas de dinamita. Estamos sin hogar ahora y meneamos nuestras cinturas hacia el piso de la corte. El océano Atlántico tira mi voz a las malas hierbas de la ciudad, malas hierbas citadinas de la otra confederación. Yo pondría doble énfasis sobre este poema, en esta amistad pandillera. Señales del apocalipsis en todas direcciones. Yo desgastaría este poema. En mi quinta comida omitida, hoy, Señor, nos hacemos mejores amigos. Cuadernos de la tienda de $1 en un contexto masivo. Tapa de pluma llena de balas. La línea de color en California se juega en tipos de protesta necro que duermen sobre la otra tierra. Mientras estamos esperando tirar de parte de la muralista, esperar a tirar. Un tipo de absentismo escolar de un viejo o una mancha de lágrimas sobre un folleto de las panteras. Vendedor de libros sin hogar, hablando de Bobby el pequeño conquistador. Una crisis de correcciones al aire libre, extradición química y canciones de guerra desvanecientes. A la vuelta de la esquina del sur de Texas, tú finges que la prisión es un río. Tú te casaste con un policía americano, piel negra, mantras blancas, como balas a velocidad normal, cambiando una vida normal. Como caminando de vuelta a los Estados Unidos en derrota.
Hi, I'm Marina Perez-Wong.
And I'm Elaine Chu.
We're Twin Wells Mural Company.
This mural was really special when Megan and Christopher approached us to do it, and we were honored to be able to do this for Luis's memory, his spirit, and his family, and for the community.
Started, we had that design from Patrick set up where there was a Virgin Mary and Luis was here in the center, and they were thinking that we were going to put these, what do they call them?
Oh, little vignettes.
The vignettes,
yeah.
And include his story in those. I think that was part of it. That's it.
So we, and then his family wanted some Mayan elements from where he was from.
Yeah, I think so. We felt like that was really important. So a few things. I mean, the Quetzalcoatl going around.
Just like, depicting life and death, the cycle, and
this pattern here is a Mayan pattern. We use the color green specifically because we want in lots of our murals to create a sense of healing, and so green is the color of growth, it's the color of healing, and we really try and push that in all of our murals, but that's something specific to this wall. We want the community, his family, and his story to be heard, but also to have some healing from that trauma.
And then, so yeah, we could talk about the little vignettes. They depict Luis's story from the beginning in his hometown in Teabo. Is that?
I forget.
Teabo.
Yeah. Thank you. But yes, him and his brother used to go around the community, and so you can see him. He's the older of the two, and his younger brother, used to have a twin, and they'd in that community, and you would walk around as twins, and the community would kind of bless you with food offerings or things that they needed, because twins were looked at as like a sign of like magic, something special that you have to give them more because they're two. And so when one of the twins died, Luis took over in his place, and so they would both walk around the community as sort of twins that weren't really twins, but the community took care of them still. So and then this one is of him and his brothers and sisters, and just being in the fields, and they would be playing games, but really they'd also be working at the same time. So it's that dynamic of enjoying life and still, pushing the fruit of the labor.
Yeah. to feed their families.
To feed their families.
Yes. And then we have this one where you could see Luis is in the center, and his brother left and went to San Francisco first. And you can see him kind of in the background. So in front of Luis is this book of San Francisco, and kind of him thinking about heading to
with his other brothers.
Yeah, to work and provide for his family.
And that takes us to our next piece. So he used to work at Mel's Diner, and he would work and he would take the money that he made and send it back home. So we wanted to show that. So we put some money in the envelope and wrote to Mama and Papa. And you can see him. He's got his
he was a
outfit.
Dishwasher at Mel's. But then, he lost his job. And I think, because he spoke Mayan, he didn't speak, or he felt more comfortable speaking Mayan. So I think it was really hard for him to communicate. And that's kind of an important part of the story, is that
loss of communication.
With the police, and they didn't really try. Nobody could communicate with him to de-escalate the situation.
Yeah.
And so with the struggles that losing his job, I think he had some setbacks, and he was evicted from his place on Market Street. You can see his stuff thrown away in a dumpster. And I don't think he ever really recovered from that instability.
I mean, even then, I think he was still sending money home, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. Like, whatever he made, he was trying to send money home. So he'd be homeless, but still working. So that's the case for lots of people that are in this situation.
Mm-hmm. And then, the last vignette, we painted in black and white. And that one was really hard for us to figure out how to depict. We didn't know how to depict death, because Marina and I normally don't do that.
No.
Yeah.
But that's an important part of the story. The fact that somebody called 911 on him, saying, I don't know, that they were threatened by him.
Because he had a knife, or he seemed erratic. And so they called the police, and so you see
for him to just be sitting against a door, not hurting anybody, with a ball. Actually, the corn here is also representative of his Mayan roots. Corn is like a really important factor in life for most Mexican Americans. And so we wanted to show growth and continuation in life through the corn as well. And then the Virgin Mary is, I don't know if you can see, she's Mayan. We wanted her to look not like the European version of the Virgin Mary, but like somebody who looked like him, who could have been like somebody like his mother. And she's scowling in that direction, not for no reason, but because literally across the street there is a Mission Police Department. So we wanted them to know that she's judging them for their actions and scowling very appropriately. And then we have Luis. We painted him when he first came to San Francisco, so younger, just to keep alive that hope and dreams that he had, and a lot of young people that traveled to San Francisco to provide for their families or find a better life. And so keeping his spirit alive. And And that milagro is part of that also, to kind of show his spirit lives on.
Tu pena se lleva el viento, jilguera, no llores más. Volando se fue tu cría y nunca más volverá. Así le cantaba un nido el niño que lo encontró. Pensaba en su madre buena y en una copla su amor juró. Pensaba en su madre buena.
Thank you, everybody, for watching the film. It was even, I've seen the film before, but I didn't think it would be more powerful watching it virtually with a group of people. But it really struck me again, just how powerful the words are, how powerful the images are, and how important that story is to remember in our community. So thank you, everybody, and thank you to all the poets and the artists. Really appreciate your work. Now we're going to begin the Q&A. I believe Evan's going to send me some questions from the chat. I don't have any questions yet, but I do have a question for Marina and Elaine. I know that when you had an image that you were working with, a design that had another artist had done that had worked with the family, and you guys said that you had built on it with the Mayan symbology or symbolism. How did you specifically pick that weaving pattern that was shown in the background? It was just such a beautiful backdrop for that.
Well, I had looked into different patterns. Elaine and I were both talking about how we wanted to show, well, obviously something that was reflective of his culture. So we were looking specifically at Mayan patterns, especially the weaving, because it feels like it's more textural and it's made from the hand. So it's definitely of the people of that region. And then the colors, like we said, were specific to our wanting to put growth into it and healing. Elaine, do you want to?
Yeah, no, Marina found that pattern and it was just perfect. And especially, we were trying to weave his story and to integrate beautiful fabric. It was, perfect when we saw it. So, yeah. And we've been doing that with some of our murals, like integrating some of textiles and, because it's such a beautiful art form too in itself.
Yeah, it makes a wonderful backdrop that just really adds another layer of dimension to that beautiful mural. Heather, I was curious about your second poem about the lake. It was the biggest lake of west of the Mississippi in the United States that was dried up in 20. Would you say 20 years?
Yeah, Tulare, the Tulare. Tulare.
Yeah. So I mean, when you wrote that poem, what spoke to you about the lake as a symbol of this change in nature that man's causing?
Well, growing up in the West, we're so rightfully obsessed with water. And I found it fascinating that there was this African-American utopian city created, Allensworth, but it was created at the same time that they were reimagining, that these other people were reimagining Los Angeles and changing LA through water and the damming of Owens Valley and all this, and also Tulare. And so it negatively impacted this it took many years, but it did ultimately negatively impact this utopian city that was created, Allensworth. And it continues to impact negatively on the Central Valley with high arsenic and benzene levels in the water, and it goes on and on with that whole area. But you can't talk about anything in California in the last 150 years without addressing water, really. So.
Adriana, I had a question for you. I had mentioned that when the family came up for the civil trial, and we had just a very brief moment to meet with them on the night that we had the walk through the mission, and we were giving out food to people in encampments. But I was wondering if you could share just like a little bit more about the experience with the family here in San Francisco during the civil trial, and that just what a heart-wrenching experience that must have been.
Sure, it was a very dramatic experience for all of us. Their family members, I don't think, have traveled further from Teabo than Cancun, and that doesn't even include all of them. But by city order, to provide her the positions, they had to fly in on what was called probation, a special permit, which meant that we had to fly from Merida to the border at Calexico and cross by foot and be received by their lawyers. It was a very complicated process. So all that was very exciting and dramatic and scary for the entire family. There are Mayan people who day to day, they're very hard workers. And so coming to San Francisco was already a transformative experience. But in doing so, and especially that border crossing by foot, they were able in some ways to start reliving the journey of their father, of Luis, to San Francisco. So when we got here, there was a lot of intense lawyerly stuff to do, but there was an opportunity to, of course, show them where he had died and where he had lived in the encampment. But we also took him to the places where he had worked on, the tourist zone by Fisherman's Wharf and at Mel's Diner. And we had a very moving moment because one of the things that we'd done with Justice for Luis, and it was just around, it was early January. So in Mexican custom, like in other cultures, we have the king's cake for Epiphany. And so we distributed, like we had on other occasions, Rosca de Reyes, king's cake, and hot chocolate. And we did this with the family, going out to the encampments. And we had a really beautiful moment. And a Mission Local actually wrote a pretty good piece about the encounter. When we come to one of the tents, and we would tell people this is on behalf of Luis Góngora Pat. And a woman came out and started talking to his widow and said, Luis saved me. She said she started talking to her about how she feels that Luis had saved her life because he had intervened in a very heavy domestic violence incident. And so it was really moving and to reassert for the family the person that they knew their father and their husband to be, rather than the narrative of the police. So that's one of the big experiences, but also through that journey, moving around the neighborhood and retracing his steps, we were able to show something as healing and beautiful as the mural. This vibrant emerald mural that elicits not only the weaving, which all of the family, especially the women, are embroiderers, but also the greenery of the Yucatán around where they live. So they have pictures, of course, in front of it, and eventually they had to go back home on a very restricted permit to be here. And that was traumatic in a different sense, but I think they all had an experience, a very healing experience. And there's a story that I don't tell often, but when we were taken back to the airport, we were in a little bit of a hurry, Mexican style. We're running late to the airport, and there were some reporters that wanted to catch them there. And we got to the altar at 19th and Shotwell, and I had a little sapo. I don't know if people caught this, but in the readings, but a lot of the poets mentioned that he was called Sapo, which is toad. It's because of the way his voice. It was a reference to the way he spoke, and so they called him Sapo. And so I had a little box that was a Sapo. And at some point I got there and we were rushing and I said, "Come on, Sapo, get in there." And I just clapped it down and I gave it to Doña Carmen. And it was very strange. Ever since that happened, we feel like Luis has gone home. They took him back home.
Oh, that's a really beautiful story. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. We have a question for all the poets. What was your experience like responding to the mural and to Luis's story? Was it different for you to work? Was it different than the work you usually do? And do you think this experience will change your writing in the future? And I just leave this open. Who wants to jump in from the poets, please? Anybody?
Okay, I'll address it. I won't leave you hanging there, Chris.
Thank you.
It is very much in line with this particular project that I just finished, this manuscript looking at overlooked histories of the West that I grew up in. But it also, I love working with artists of different media, whether it's musicians or visual artists or dancers. I actually really love that type of collaboration. And while this was sort of a static collaboration in that it was a response, I feel like this entire project has been this amazing multimedia collaboration with everybody. And it's been wonderful and kicks it up to the next level for me. So thank you.
I don't know if any other poets want to respond to Aileen.
Yeah, so I tried to interpret and respond to the mural by reconstructing Luis's life as faithfully as I could, like Marina and Elaine. My notes, I think, were about 107 pages long. I tried to incorporate the narrative of the Yucatán terrain and Maya culture, such as the milpa system and death rituals, alongside socio-cultural constructs. I wanted readers to be able to connect and empathize with the poem's message, but at the same time, I wanted to be clear that this is about Luis. I was determined to create a space that honors Luis's life and his family's quest for justice.
And Tongo, I don't know if would you like to respond to that of what the experience was like for you?
It was a beautiful kind of meditation in that usually when I write it can get pretty I just kind of let my various neurotic tendencies have their fun, but in working with this piece, I really just kind of just had the mural up on on the computer screen and just kind of really just had one eye half on it and the other on the pen, and it did kind of like and also like kept my attention on just like almost the physical sensations that were just kind of like running through me as I was just dealing with this murderous imperialism that will kill anybody anywhere, and it did kind of it wasn't it's something I've continued since this of trying to again kind of relax into internal realities of energy as I'm writing, more than write from the kind of the front of my mind, but to kind of like write from my body is what I kind of stumbled onto and have continued, and so I'm very appreciative.
Thank you. And Chris, would you like to respond what the process was like for you and if it changed how your work will be in the future?
Can people hear me? Is my mic working?
It's very low.
Yeah, I'm having problems. I'm just going to say a lot of what the other people said, and I really liked learning about Luis's family, and I would actually like to learn more, and learning a lot about the Yucatan and the Mayan culture in the Yucatan. And, you know, a lot of the historical things that I, as ignorant white guy, didn't know. I didn't know there were 50,000 Mayans living in San Francisco. And Adriana was very, very helpful. She sent me, I would ask her questions about Mayan culture. She sent me videos of celebrations and the rain ceremony. And that was, you know, I mean, I don't want to say it was a pleasure because I don't want to trivialize anything, but I learned a lot, and I really appreciate working with this community.
Thank you. Yeah. The next question we have is for Adriana. What is the best way for those of us who are listening tonight that we can help justice for Luis?
Thank you. I think the first thing I want to do before answering that question is to bring in Luis's family, the family that has carried his justice cause here. At the beginning of the video, you saw Luis Pat standing right beside me. You didn't get to hear him. I think it was a choice just to hear the interpretation, but he spoke very eloquently about his cousin Luis. There is also his brother, Jose Góngora Pat, who has carried this case. They work really hard. So has Carlos Potpat, the three of them, I call them the Mayan warriors. And so the first thing, if you want to help, if somebody, they are essential restaurant workers, like the vast majority of Mayan Yucatecans in the city. So if anybody wants to reach out to us to give a donation, that is always welcome. I cannot tell you, they support families back in Yucatan. That's one thing. The other thing is that we remain committed to having an impact on policing in the city, and we're very involved right now in alternatives to developing alternatives to policing, especially in response to unhoused people. So please support those reforms that you see going on, even the negotiation to block the SFPOA MOU contract right now. Reach out to your supervisors, be in touch with police reforms. And other than that, I think there's a lot of creativity in our community. If you ever want to invite the family to participate in something as beautiful as a creative or educational as Wall and Response and the wonderful poets and muralists and organizers and filmmakers, they've all contributed. We're always down for that. And for me, it's a double purpose. My purpose is to just accompany the family, but they carry a lot of grief and trauma. And these moments are actually ones of elevating their justice cause, and they feel accompanied by an entire community. So that's another way. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a question for Maw and Megan. As curators, how did you decide who to invite to write the poetry? What poets to invite to the project?
So I guess I can answer that. Well, originally our project was going to take place live on the Alley. So, you know, the first consideration was that we're choosing Bay Area poets. And then because of the pandemic, of course, now it's online. And you know, when I thought about the poets and looked at the murals that Megan had chosen, I thought about poets that, you know, address social justice issues. So that was, you know, I think my main consideration, and poets, of course, whose work I admire. And, but, you know, it's hard because there's so many amazing poets in the Bay Area, and But I think those were the two main factors. Megan, did you want to add anything to that, or? No, okay.
Well, we have one last question here. It's going to come from me, but it's for Megan and Maw. And I've known you both 9 years now. In the 9 years, I've seen 3 collaborations. There's the Broadside Attractions, Vanquish Trains, the Flower Interruption, and now Wall and Response. And so you've collaborated so much, you call yourselves the Fab Collab. And I'm just curious, because these projects have been so beautifully thought out and so depthful in their messaging. I'm wondering if you guys have any future collaborations between visual and the word plan for the future here.
Well, I don't think we have any future ones coming up, since this project is going to end next year in the spring. But I wanted to talk about when I first met Megan, which was in 1999. We met through my sister Methet and Southern Exposure, and Megan and I just hit it off. And I invited her to write a piece for Comet Magazine, a magazine that I was doing with my friend Kathleen Munnelly. And Megan and I became fast friends. And just to talk about one of the projects we worked on, which you brought up, Christopher, Broadside Attractions, we worked with 12 Bay Area poets and writers and 12 Bay Area artists. And it took place over a 2-year period. And basically, the artists and the poets created new work together, and it was through Intersection for the Arts. And it was, I think it was during this period that I started calling Megan my Fab Collab. And so the nickname stuck. And that's the story of how we became Fab Collabs. Not really, but
that is the story. Yeah, and it's been a great God, we've known each other now over 20 years, and we just keep, as frustrating as collaborating can be, because for those of us who do it a lot, collaboration can be really, really hard and really challenging. But what I love about it, and what I've loved working with Ma, is just how that kind of collective energy, and especially working on these large projects, that collective energy and collective creativity that happens when you bring a lot of folks together who are amazing. And the work that can be done, that's not just the individual, but it's so much greater than all of us, right? And that's what I've loved about doing this work, Ma, with you and with all of you who are here as well. And I really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
I was going to say, we do have one last question that came in. I'm going to just try to get one question in from our audience here, from Kimi Sugaki. I'm going to apologize for not pronouncing the name correctly. Has the family ever heard the poems? And if so, what response did they have? And this one's for Adriana.
Sure, and I think this gives me an opportunity to talk about how the interpretations, the translations came about. And I, as I said before, my work is to accompany the family. And so when Luis was present at the filming of the poems, the poets had sent me copies prior to that date. And so I translated them so that Luis, who was the family member who was available to be at the filming, he could follow their words. So we had the poems written out there, and we translated tangos on the spot, I remember. And so Luis Pot at the filming was able to hear them and comment to me, and I think he was able to comment to the poets directly. But right now, probably other family members are hearing the poems for the first time, and so we can get their reactions later. But this video, because it's in English and Spanish, we can then show it all the way in Teabo so that his family in Teabo can hear the poems.
Thank you, Adriana. And that's going to do it for our event this evening. I want to thank our event hosts, the Booksmith and the Bindery, event producer Evan Karp, curators Megan Wilson and Maw Shein Win, poets Heather Bourbeau, Aileen Cassinetto, Tongo Eisen-Martin, and Chris Stroffolino, artists Marina Perez-Wong and Elaine Chu, and the co-founders of Justice and Honor for Luis Góngora Pat, justiceforluis.org, the Góngora family spokesperson Luis Poot, and human rights defender Adriana Camanera, videographer Mahima Kotian. Wall in Response is made possible with the generous support of the San Francisco Arts Commission and the Zellerbach Family Foundation. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and I hope you have a safe and good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much. Thank you, Evan. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Christopher, for emceeing tonight. And to those of you who are tuned in at home, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for joining us.
Find out more about all of these poets, the muralists, the curators. You can find it all at booksmith.com. And I'll drop a link in for the next event. Please note that the date is not finalized yet, but the poets and the mural are finalized, so you can read about them and you can sign up to get notifications about the second event now. So thank you, and congratulations also to Ma and Megan and to all of you artists for your work on this project. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everybody. Take care, and please stay.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.